Everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Matt Taglia, Senior Director of Emerson College Polling. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Emerson College Polling has a California-centric poll, and I want to dive right into it. I first want to start with the gerrymandering fight that started in Texas and made its way to California. And in an effort to fight fire with fire, as he described it, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Proposition 50, which is legislation that will leave it up to voters in his state to decide if the congressional maps will be redrawn. And this measure is in direct retaliation to what happened in Texas, where the maps were redrawn to flip 5 seats potentially that were blue, potentially flip them to red. So the maps in California would have the opposite effect. It has the potential to flip 5 red seats to blue. This is a special election. It will be a special election in November for Prop 50. To start off the conversation, how are voters feeling about it?
Yeah, Brittany, and we have tested this previously last month when the plans for this were still coming down the line. It had not been approved yet to be on the ballot in November. But now that we have had a little bit of time and folks are starting to see and hear about Proposition 50, we decided to test it this month. So just looking at first at how much this has penetrated the electorate, how many folks are paying attention, we see that a majority say that they have heard a lot, 51%. 34% say that they've heard at least some about Proposition 50. And when we look at these demographics, we see that older voters are much more aware of this and that younger voters aren't so much. They're much less likely to say that they've heard a lot. Now, that's going to come into play when we look at the actual ballot test. So looking at Proposition 50, giving them roughly the ballot language, we see that 51% would say yes if the vote were held today. 34% would say no, and 15% are undecided. So this is clearly, we've got a majority who are in favor of Proposition 50 and a fairly low minority who are against.
And so when you look who is supporting this, who is against it, how does it break down by demo? I could imagine that Democrats are probably much more thrilled with this proposition, considering it has the potential to help them.
Okay, so looking at the demographics, I think first we should look at the folks who say that they're very likely to vote. So 55% of those folks say that they would support Proposition 50 if the vote were held today. 35% say no. So that's a 20-point lead among these folks who are most likely to turn out. I think that's important to remember as well. As we get closer to the election, I think we're more likely to see the vote trickle towards 20% than we are towards that 10% margin mark. Looking at some of these other demographics, we see that college graduates, folks who have either a college degree or a postgraduate degree, they are most in favor. So 60% are in favor. Among folks who don't have a college degree, 43% are in favor. So much lower. There's definitely an education split here. There's also a bit of an age split, but it's not exactly down the middle, under 50, over 50. It's really just the folks who are over the age of 70 who are split here. So 45% say they would vote yes, 42% say they would vote no. I think these sort of traditionalist voters here, they would be the main targets of the opposition campaign. And right now, them being split, that's a tough place to be if you are on that opposition campaign. You really want those older voters to be turning out and voting no against this.
Well, as we know, Governor Gavin Newsom is all for Prop 50. Someone who's had his job before is not, and that's former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was the state's last Republican governor, and he is actively campaigning against Prop 50. And as we know, while he was governor, he supported an initiative that allowed the maps to be drawn by an independent redistricting committee. And he said this week that, quote, "This is not political, this is more about democracy." He also added this: "If you vote yes on that, meaning Prop 50, we go backwards." So, how much weight are voters in California giving to what Arnold Schwarzenegger is saying?
And Brittany, the answer to that, how much weight voters are giving to former Governor Schwarzenegger's position on the issue is not very much. So 66% say that his position makes no difference on their vote. Just 22% say that it makes them more likely to support the Proposition 50. 12% say that it makes them less likely to support it. So really we see that, if anything, Governor Schwarzenegger's position is pushing people more towards Proposition 50 than what he intended.
And you and I have had conversations on Governor Gavin Newsom, right? Because at the beginning of this year, when President Trump came back into office, it seemed like he wanted to make inroads with Republicans. Now he is going full out against President Trump. And especially when it comes to Prop 50, it looks like he is doing this, or he's said as much, he's doing this in direct retaliation to what happened in Texas. In light of this, how are voters feeling about Governor Gavin Newsom right now?
And I think that, a story here that we've been covering since roughly the start of this Trump administration is this rise, steady and then a little bit more meteoric rise of Governor Newsom and his image among the public, both in California and nationwide. So his approval right now sits at 46% approve, 40% disapprove. That is a huge change from the start of the year when we tested this earlier. He was at net disapproval level there. This is a 2-point increase since August towards net approval. 74% of the folks who say they're going to vote yes approve of Governor Gavin Newsom. Republicans overwhelmingly disapprove, as you might expect, but independents are more neutral. So, I really think it's worth emphasizing here. Governor Newsom's approval is really rising. It's steadily moving since the past couple of months, really since he started his social media campaigns, especially since he started his campaign on Proposition 50. And I think that all of that is going to culminate in the vote this November. If he wins, if Proposition 50 wins, his stock is going to go way up.
And then when you're looking at his approval, how does that stack up to President Trump's? Because as we know, California is a deeply blue state. How do voters feel there about the president?
And as you might expect, Trump's approval in the state of California is not good. 35% approve versus 57%, a majority who disapprove, a 27-point or a 22-point rather margin, fairly similar to the margin that we saw in the 2024 election. But Trump has certainly not improved his standing in California. Independent voters in California disapprove by about 20 points. I don't think necessarily that President Trump is trying to improve his approval rating in California. Frankly, I don't think he thinks about it that much. But as things go, right now, his stock is down in California and Governor Newsom's is up.
And now I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about the governor's race because there are a lot of people in California right now that are trying to take Gavin Newsom's seat. And when we talked about polling last time regarding this race, there was a big what if that was answered right after right before you and I talked, rather. Former Vice President Kamala Harris decided she's not throwing her hat in the ring. So now that that has really had a time to settle in for voters in California, what does the state of this race look like?
And I think, in a word, the state of this race is a mess. So, as you know, in California, it is a so called jungle primary to determine the top two candidates to move on to the general. There are a lot of candidates here. And frankly, I think voters aren't sure who some of these folks are. They want to weigh their options, and they haven't heard really much of anything from the campaigns. So, as things stand right now, Katie Porter maintains her lead, 16%. Then we have Republicans Hilton and Bianco with 10% and 8% respectively, and then Becerra with 5%. All others are under 5 with 38% undecided. So obviously, we're very early here. There's still a long way to go, but a large component, a plurality of voters here are undecided. When we throw Senator Padilla into the race, as it has been mentioned that he might enter this race, he has 7%. All others of the top 5 candidates maintain the same support. So he's really just pulling from that sort of undecided vote, maybe some of these other minor candidates. I would expect that to change once he announces, if and when he announces, and once he starts running ads for the governor's race. That could very quickly change. But right now, it doesn't have a substantial impact on the race. This is really anyone's ball game.
And when you're looking and knowing that this is a jungle primary, there's more Democrats in the field right now than Republicans. Do you think that changes people's strategies that are running for this race? That they might say, hey, I don't want a Republican to be number two, so I'll drop out. What does that really look like? How will that change the race?
That could really change the race. And whether or not some of these candidates are looking at it that way, they probably should. I think on both sides. Really, I think right now, that Republican vote is being split. It's fairly even between Bianco and Hilton. So if one of them were to drop out, then that would really help boost the other candidate, get into that second place slot. On the Democratic side, there are even more candidates, and frankly, it's tough to see who comes out on top. And two Democratic candidates, for that matter, making it into the top two positions. I don't see that happening as long as there are this many candidates in the field.
And when you're looking at all these candidates, there's not really anyone that pops out as having that name recognition, really that household name that Vice President Kamala Harris did have. And that's why when she was in the polling, hypothetically speaking, of course, she was taking this race away with her. So when you're looking at the Democrats specifically in this race, how does it break down by demo? Who's supporting who?
And we I don't want to get too far into the demographics here because, frankly, the sample sizes are pretty small as far as these Democratic candidates, as far as any of these candidates. We do see that Katie Porter has had a little bit of a boost from some of the younger candidates who recognize her name, who know her politics roughly. And when I say younger, I mean generally under 50. Beyond that, it's really hard to find any sort of camps here of folks moving towards one candidate or the other. Uh, Again, this is an open field, an open contest. All these voters are up for grabs, and I think that if we did see someone like Padilla enter the race, that would really change things. I think that his polling here is understated, based alone on the fact that he has not entered the race. He's not in front of voters right now, unlike some of these other candidates.
And the real winner of this race is undecided because that's what is winning by a landslide right now. It's really anyone's race. So who does that undecided help more right now? Or is that just all up for grabs and it can really help anyone?
I think it most helps Padilla. If he enters the race, then he will scoop up some of that support. He has okay name recognition. It is not, necessarily what we would expect for a sitting U.S. senator. But again, I think that that does change if he were to formally enter the race. Um, Katie Porter is also likely to benefit from that undecided vote. She's run statewide before. She does have pretty good name recognition, and clearly she is the front runner in the race currently. But beyond that, I think some of these other candidates, some of these smaller candidates, especially some of the regional ones, they're going to have a really tough time breaking that undecided vote because they're going to have to campaign in other parts of the state where they don't necessarily feel comfortable. They don't necessarily know the voters and the issues in those parts of the state. That's always the challenge when you enter the race as a more regional specific candidate, especially in a large state like California. There's just a lot to consider there. There's a lot of money that has to be spent and a lot of your time as a candidate that has to be spent on the trail speaking to those voters.
And so this race is wide open. It will be a competitive race because no one, well, Katie Porter is the front runner. I mean, there's still so much that remains to be seen in this, and it's not like she's just far and away in the lead here. So it could very well come down to the issues. And if I was a candidate who maybe wasn't polling as high, I would turn to the issues, see what Californian voters care about the most, and really campaign on that. So what are those issues?
And so we actually asked two different sets of issues here, Brittany, which we don't normally do, but we decided to see what the difference was. So first, we asked folks what their top issue was in the United States, and we found that 31% say it's the economy, as we usually expect. 28% said that threats to democracy is their top issue, and then 11% said immigration. If we look at California specifically, so when we ask what's their top issue for the state of California, economy once again comes first, 30%, but in second place is housing. And we've seen this before. In California, housing is always a top issue. Now, if we combine the economy and housing, we see a majority of the electorate say that one of those is their top issue. So I think obviously the candidate for governor must focus on the economy and especially housing. We see in third place threats to democracy, a little bit lower at 13%, and then immigration standing at 11%. I think that the candidates do need to speak to all of these issues, but again, those top issues, the economy and housing in particular, those are top issues that they will have to speak to.
Well, if I learned anything from any of our conversations over the past over a year, it's that anything can happen in these races. It's really, I mean, anything can change in just a month, let alone the months we have until this primary. And I'm sure and I hope that we can talk about it as we see the polling progress. Matt Taglia, thanks for the conversation per usual. I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Brittany. See you soon.